Welcome back. In this video we're going to do some more neurographic art and we're going to make 12 artist trading cards. I want to acknowledge the inventor of neurographic art, which is Pavel Piskarev. So the inspiration for this project was that I laid out some ideas in my artist notebook and knew I wanted to work with the artist trading cards because they're much smaller to work with and therefore the artworks are far quicker to create, which is a great thing. So I made some thumbnail sketches about how I thought this series would develop and how it would look as a whole. So that was one thing to give like an overview of the whole series beforehand. So if we have a look at the supplies I'm using, and I urge you to use what you have on hand, you don't need to have exactly what I have here. So I am using watercolor paper because I'm using watercolor paints. You're going to need a ruler, a circle template. I have an eraser. I then have some watercolor paints. I've got an extra gold paint there. I have 2 paint brushes. I'm using a 2H pencil. I have a black marker and a gold marker. I do have a pair of scissors there, although I actually used a paper cutter, but if you don't have that, you can certainly cut your paper with scissors. So let's get the artist trading cards organized. You can buy them ready cut from Strathmore. I will put a link below, but I just use watercolor paper that I have, and I'm going to be measuring and cutting it up into the sizes that I need. So artist trading cards are 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches, and that works out to be around 62 millimeters by 90 millimeters. It's actually the same size as a regular playing card that you would use if you were playing bridge or something. So here I'm measuring them out at 2.5 inches and just putting a mark there. Then I'm going to be drawing a line so I know where to cut. The reason I want to use the watercolor paper is that obviously I'm going to be using the watercolor paints and it will retain the moisture a lot better than just any regular old card. So I'm dividing this whole sheet up into 2.5 inches, and then I will be measuring it by 3.5 inches. It ultimately only lets me, I think, get 8 cards out of one sheet, and because artist trading cards are always or very often in series of 12, I actually going to be cutting up 2 sheets, so I'll end up with 16 cards in the end, but I will only be using 12 for the actual artist trading cards. Once I've marked out the 8 cards on the page, I'll actually just put a wiggle on the bit that I'm cutting off because it does get confusing sometimes afterwards, so I want to make sure that I know what I'm cutting and what I'm not. And as I say, you can of course use scissors, but I did actually have a paper cutter that I'm going to be using so that I can just get a sharper line. And if you have a paper cutter, certainly use it for this type of work. Now the idea is that you want to be cutting along the pencil line exactly, so you want to line up your pencil line exactly on the cutting edge, which is to the right of that big blue thing. The blue slider is actually the cutting wheel, and what you're going to do is slide your paper in there, line up with your pencil mark to the right hand side, and then hold firmly and cut your paper. This is how I do it. It's so much easier to use a paper cutter, especially if you want all your cards to be the same size. And one tip I want to give you if you are using a paper cutter is only ever cut away from you. So you want the cutting head at the bottom, and you push away doing your cuts. Don't cut down towards yourself. You don't have the same effort or impetus on it there, and you get far better cuts when you are cutting away from yourself with the paper cutter. As you can see there, I'm going through now and cutting all the little cards out, keeping the ones I want on the right and chucking the bits that don't actually, that are the throwaway pieces, just to the left. So I'm cutting each of the 2 cards up, and in the end I will have 16 cards, although we're only really going to use 12, and of course that does leave you a couple just in case you do make a botch, which sometimes happens. So now I've now got most of my cards cut. This is really what they're going to be looking like, and we're going to start working with them from there. Generally with artist trading cards, these are cards that you create almost as calling cards for your artwork. So the art that you place on your artist trading cards, which you trade with other artist galleries or whomever, are a reflection of the type of artwork that you do. So they are like mini versions of general art that they could expect that you would be creating. And as I've said before, they're quick to do. That's why I really enjoy working on artist trading cards. So now we're going to start working with the circles. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do 3 cards in front of you, although we will eventually be doing the whole 12, but a lot of that will be done behind the scenes. So on the first card, we're going to use our circle template and we're going to draw 1 circle. On the second card, we're going to be drawing 2 circles, and on the third card, we'll be drawing 3 circles. I'm using a 2H pencil here because I want to describe the circles onto the card lightly. I don't know if it'll show up very well on the video, but I don't want to use my pen on my template because it messes up your template in the end. So I always prefer to use a pencil. So that first card had 1 circle. This second card is going to have 2 circles, and the size of the circle doesn't matter. You want to kind of mix it up a bit, use different sizes on each of your cards. But in the end, you're going to have the first 3 cards will have 1 circle, 2 circles, and then 3 circles. What I'll do afterwards is, for the other 12 cards, I will create actually 4 cards with 1 circle on, and 4 cards with 2 circles on, and 4 cards with 3 circles on, and you'll see that a little bit later on. Circles are very popular shapes for neurographic art. I also did this with ellipses as well, and I might show you that at some other time, but circles are great for neurographic art, as you'll see that they feature on many of these artworks. Now we're going to be doing the inking bit. So here I'm using a Sharpie pen. There's 2 types of Sharpie pens. There's this one where the lid comes on and off and on and off, which is the general pen. I find it annoying. Or you can get the retractable pen, and anyone who's had kids working at Starbucks, you will know about this pen. It's super handy. This is the one I'm going to be using, although it doesn't really matter. Of course, you can use any pen you have to hand. So what I'm going to do is go over the pencil of all of the circles carefully. It doesn't have to be exact, but I'm going over each of these circles. That's the first one, and then I'll move on to the card with the 2 circles on. So the idea is that we're setting up the framework for these artist trading cards. In a way, I'm trying to perhaps bring some balance into the composition of the cards as well. So not necessarily everything is just plonked right in the middle or in a dead straight line. The idea is to add a bit of interest, and this is how the circles do on the actual page. So there you have it, 1 circle, 2 circles, and 3 circles. And this is showing the other 9 circles that I did afterwards, where I've got the top 3, I've got 1 circle, then 2 circles, and then 3 circles. So next we're going to be using our non-dominant hand. So this means if you're right-handed, which I am, I'm going to put the pen in my left hand. And if you're left-handed, you put the pen in your right hand. It's a way of drawing the neurographic line that is not so predictive as you would when you're using your dominant hand. So you're holding the pen very lightly, and we're actually going to be drawing these neurographic lines now. So the first line is going to come across from the bottom left, in my case, and I just slowly, casually, lightly move it across the page to the other side. The idea is it doesn't repeat or anything. Then I actually turn the page around and continue on, because I'm not very good with my left hand, and that's what gives the line that kind of wiggle that we like for neurographic lines, where there's no repeating lines and there's no smooth lines either. Now I do try to go through, so I've put 3 lines on that page, and I do try to go through the circles to connect them, but I'm not being specific about it. What I'm doing is I'm going through loosely to try and bring some balance to the composition, making sure that all of the circles are connected in some way to one of the neurographic lines. So I've just speeded it up a little bit here, and there you can see I'm doing that line, and I find it easier to turn the page, and you might find that easier too. There are many ways to do this, but we're just doing 3 lines on each page. You need to check that all of the lines go to the edges of the pages. So your neurographic line must reach the edge of the page. This is part of it, that it's flowing all the way across the page from one side to the other, and there's no hanging ends with the neurographic line. Now we're going to be curving all our connections. So this is part of the meaning of this artwork, that the neural connections in your brain are where 2 lines come together and thought patterns occur. And this is how you create new thought patterns as well. This is the science behind it. So what we're going to do is where 2 lines intersect, or where a line intersects with a circle, we are going to curve those connections. We're going to soften each connection So technically you're putting 4 curves at each intersection where 2 lines cross, because you've got 4 intersections. And what happens is that this tends to make the art look like you've got blobs, because you're curving all of your empty spaces into blobs basically. Now this method is symbolic of new thought patterns occurring in your head, whereas we very often just repeat patterns. If you're trying to improve or use your brain plasticity to think things through differently and find other solutions and use your brain to its full capacity, ideally, this is symbolically what we're doing. We are creating new pathways, new connections, and therefore new ideas will sprout from this kind of artwork. You can of course start this artwork with posing a question such as, should I start a new job or something? And as you are slowly working through all these connections, you are considering your options here. So this is part of the meditative part of this artwork, where you're actually taking your time to do these connections. This is not a part to rush, even though I have speeded it up here. You want to take your time and enjoy the process as you are thinking about perhaps whatever your situation is or issues that you're trying to deal with. You'll complete all the other 12 cards behind the scenes. This is what I've done. So this is my other 9 cards that I've completed with the circles, with the lines, and with all the connections smoothed out. And I'll show you a little bit more closer up there on some of these cards. They're not exactly perfect. Some of the lines are thinner, some of the lines are thicker, but each one is symbolically of these neural pathways that are creating new connections for me. Next up, we're going to do some watercolor paint, and I'm going to be using 3 different mixed colors. I've got sort of a yellowy, sort of a bluey, and sort of a greeny. I have 2 paint brushes. The one is only for water, and the other is the one that's going to have the color on it. So the first color I'm mixing up is I'm taking olive green and permanent yellow deep. I'm using the Sakura Koi paint palette here, and those are the specific colors I'm mixing. So I take the 2 colors and I wet the pan, I mix the 2 colors and create a new color on my palette. You never want to use paint colors straight out of your pan. You always want to mix and create original colors. So what I do is I take my wet paintbrush, it's only got water on it, and I'm laying down water on one of the sections in the card within the lines. Next I come along with my color and I'm basically just dabbing it in there, and the watercolor paint will flow and move as we go. Then I'm wetting a second area in the card, not adjacent to the first one, adding more of this olivey greeny color to that card, and then wetting and moistening the third section and coming in with the color. So I'm finding 3 spots on each card that I can wet and paint with one color, and I'll go through all of the 12 cards, although I'm really only going to show you 3 here, laying down water and adding the color to the card. The idea is you don't want too much all at once, and we're just going to do three sections with 3 colors, because using odd numbers is always a good thing in art. That's why we've gone up to 3 circles and we did 3 lines, and now we're going to do 3 segments in one particular color. And I'll just continue on working through that. The next color I'm going to mix up is going to be kind of a bluey greeny again. I'm using Prussian blue and permanent yellow deep. So these are the 2 color names in my palette. I'm again mixing them up, wettening the actual paint, mixing it up and mixing it on my palette. So I'm just mixing really enough for what I need, but you do need to give the paint time to actually dissolve basically into the water so it's working smooth, and you want to work your paint a little bit, maybe for, I don't know, half a minute or so at least, till you've actually got your color. So then we're going to do the same thing. I've got plain water and I'm wetting one of the sections, then I'm adding in this blue tealy color. Now the first color has totally dried. I left enough time between that to make sure that it's totally dried, and also I'm trying not to go directly next to a wet area. I'm always moving further away so that I've got 3 colors the three color segments balanced on the composition. Of course, it's not perfect, it's watercolor. So again, I go in there now on the second card, adding the water, then coming in to add more color, more of the second color in there. That was quite a bit. I mopped a bit up there. Didn't quite like how much went on that one. And then continuing on again, wetting the paper, and then quickly coming in and adding this kind of blue tealy color, into that section. So I do 3 sections of the blue on every single card. And as you see, as we go through, that's actually what I've done. So with this color palette I'm using, it's sort of greens, blues and yellowish. It's very cool colors. It was I wanted to keep it pretty straightforward. I wanted it to be more naturally shaded, if you will, and more in the green spectrum. So the cooler colors are being used in this color palette. The second color, it looks quite bluey, tealy on the page. And as you'll see now, we're going to be just finishing off that last card, and then I continue on to do all the other 12 cards. So the next color that I'm going to mix is with cerulean blue and cobalt blue, and this is really the blue one. Even though the other one looked pretty blue, this particular combination is now much more dynamically blue, going through wetting in three sections, coloring in 3 sections, so it's lightening and brightening the actual composition. And those are the first 3 cards where I'm watering and adding color. So each of these cards is going to be entirely different, but the series of the whole 12 will be cohesive. Now I'm saying we're filling in a few more spaces. So if you found there is a card where there's too much white, and this is where I'm going back and just adding a touch of one or other of the colors to bring down more of the white. I'm happy to have a little bit of white still left, because I'm still going to add a 4th color here, but I want to make sure that especially on the 3 circle cards where there are more segments to fill, that I've taken down the white a bit more. So I'm just going in to fill in a couple more of the smaller sections, just to make the whole composition, I don't know, it felt better after I'd done this. So this is, because we're doing artist trading cards, a series of 12, this is why you want to do all the cards on the same day with the same palette. You don't just do one card then come and say, oh, let me do the second. Do them all at the same time. So next I'm adding a bit of gold. So this is the Van Gogh Deep Gold. It's a watercolor. It comes in this dinky little tube. It's actually the only tube watercolor paint I have, because I just used the one in the palette. And this is a small cosmetic sample jar that you can get at any departmental store, and I've squirted some of the gold paint in there, because that's basic. I don't have spare pans, so I've put it in there, and it's been there for a while. So what I'm doing now is just stimulating it with water, working it quite well. Because it's a metallic paint, you really want to make sure that this paint is thoroughly wet before you start to use it. And I won't be adding water to the paper beforehand, because I want to keep the metallic pretty strong in here. There's my test color just to see how it's flowing. You want to make sure that you've really worked this water and that the paint's flowing nicely on your brush. So load your brush, and then I'm just going in now to do a couple of segments straight. As I say, we're not doing wet on wet now, we're doing wet on dry. And I'm just going on some of those smaller segments, adding a bit of bling, adding a bit of gold, because I always tend to add a bit of gold to my artworks. It's just who I am. And adding a bit of interest. So this paint is going on a bit thicker than the first load of watercolor paints, because it is a metallic and because I want the sheen to show through. So what I'm doing is filling in basically up to 3 of the gaps on these small artworks. So these are now the smaller gaps that really are left remaining. So we're only adding a little bit of twinkle. We're not doing massive great slabs of it on these artworks with the gold. So yeah, so I kind of like working with that. It's the only metallic paint I have. I may one day get some copper and get some silver paint as well. I just haven't got round to it. And if you can see there's a little bit of a sheen on the paint, and of course you need to let that dry. So you'll continue on and do all the other 9 cards, painting the gold on. So these are just the other 9 cards. You can see they're drying here. This was a little bit from earlier, and how I've gone through with each of the colors. I did the color sequence slightly differently on these 9, but I went in with the first color and filled those 3 segments in there. I then added the second color that you can still see that it's really quite wet. It had to dry in between, and the cards are starting to curl a bit, but that's okay. And then with the actual, that's how they all look with the 2 colors on, and then I added the 3rd color, so you can see what that looks like when the 3rd color's on as well. These cards it took quite a while to paint them because it's quite fiddly and they needed to dry in between, but you do need to do the whole project in one go. Here we have the cards now with some gold on. You can quite see the shimmer there. It's not that bright, but it's definitely there when you look at it more in real life. So here's the actual 12 cards that I've got now with the 3 colors in and the gold trim on, and they have dried. The next step is to add some embellishments, because this is how I like to do it. So what I have here is a gold gel pen. I think it's a Uniball, I'm not quite sure. What I'm going to do is, when I talk about embellishments, I'm actually going to be adding some dots. Now I'm putting 3 dots in general where the black intersections are, where the big intersections are. I'm going on with 3 gold dots. So it's not at every single intersection, and it's certainly not everywhere on the page, but I'm only adding the dots where the black is quite big, because that is where the connection is. That is where the new ideas and thoughts are coming. This is the symbolic part of this artwork. So I'm going in there to stimulate and to focus, bring focus to those major black intersections. So if this intersection's big, I put 3 dots. If it's not that big, I just put 1 dot, and I went through all of the cards, just adding a little bit of embellishment. Of course, you can add anything you like depending on your color palette. Next, I'm putting a black edge around all of the cards. Because we're using a black line, I will use the black edge. Usually I put a red edge, but in this particular case, this is a black Tombow, and I'm using it to put a black edge on all the cards. The cards are dry now, and I'm just lightly running the pen along the edge of the card, because these are cards I'm going to be distributing. And as I say, sometimes I do red, but in this particular case I'm adding black because of the black lines on the card. So you are just lightly running your pen along all of the edges on all of the cards, just to give them an edge. So it looks nice. It's a way of kind of finishing off the edges. I could of course done it in paint, but I just didn't want to. I did it in the black pen. So you do every single card and put edges on all of the cards. It makes them look better, and then when you've got them actually in a stash, you can see all of the edges together. I think it's a way of finishing off. It's almost like a border, and if the card was thicker, then it really does look good if you do it in different colors, or red or green, or whatever your color palette on your artwork is. And then that's why I did it in black. So here you can see on the edges, I've put black on the edges of all of the cards. Next up, we're going to be putting some information on the back of the cards, because these are artist trading cards that are traded or given to other people. And there are 3 bits of information we're going to put on the card. First, I'm just drawing some light pencil lines, just so, because I'm going to be writing by hand. I just want to line the thing up a little bit. It doesn't have to be exact. So this is a handy little ruler I got from Muji, about 1 centimeter wide, and I'm just drawing some basic lines. I then have a Faber-Castell Pitt Micron, I think that's a 0.3 size pen, millimeter. So on the top line I'm writing series, then open quotes, and I'm calling it Winter Circles. This is the name of the series of these cards, with then extra closing quotes at the end. So the series name is Winter Circles, and that's because it's winter. I'm drawing circles, and that's why I decided to come up with this name. But of course you can call it anything you like. You can call it Spring Flowers or Moody Blues, whatever you like. Below that I'm writing the number of the card. So each card will be numbered. So the first one is number 1 of 12. And you will number each one of your 12 cards specifically, and it tells the person that there was only 12 cards in this series. Next I write my name there, which is Alison Hazel Art. That's my channel name, and it's also my website name, but it's the name I'm going by through art. Here you could actually sign the cards with your name. Then in the bottom right, I'm actually writing the date, which is the month and the year. So here we've got January 2022, which is the month I created these cards in. I actually did them way earlier in the month. I just haven't got around to getting this video out until now. And then just at the bottom, I'm writing my website name, which is alisonhazelart.com. So that when I give these trading cards to whoever I'm trading them with, or to a gallery owner, or to someone in the future, and they look at the type of art I do because they can see it on the front of the card, they will be able to say, oh, let me check out what other sort of artwork she does and who she is and blah blah blah. And it's like a calling card, it's like a business card for artists, and this is why I love artist trading cards. I'm drawing a very thin border around there because it just brings an edge to the actual card and shows off the information quite well. You could of course color this or add more embellishments or what have you on the back of your card, but your main bits of information has to be the series name, Winter Circles, the number in the series, the name of the artist or the artist's signature, the date, and of course your contact information, which could either be your email address if you wanted to, or your website, which is how I did it. So you need to make sure that each card has a different number. So you've got 1 of 12, 2 of 12, 3 of 12, up to 12 of 12. You don't want to duplicate your numbers or make some kind of mistake there. Make sure you've got 12 cards. Each one has a unique number and that it's part of a series. So ideally this would end up being a collection, but maybe not this year. I like the idea of starting with artist trading cards, especially if you're a beginner artist. I consider myself a hobby artist. I'm not making money from my art, but what I'm doing is I'm enjoying the process and I'm making the type of art that I like and putting them on these cards. I think the thing is too that you never know where your art's going to end up. That's why you need to have full information on it. And it makes sense to start off your original journey, even if you're swapping with your family or your sisters or your kids, making these cards into collections. It's a really nice way of presenting some of your art, and it's a memory as well, so they're great. So thank you so much for watching along. If you've got this far, add a blue circle emoji into the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know if you're going to be doing artist trading cards anytime in future, and specifically with the Neurographic line. I'm Alison Hazel Art. I offer ideas and inspiration for your art journey. I generally do neurographic art, colouring pages, sketch journaling, pen and ink, and watercolour. Thank you so much. I will see you next time.